Yes, so we're going to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We are here for a special public work session. It is the 26th of April, a Wednesday, and we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're just going to begin by, I'd like to seek a motion to approve the agenda as submitted and amended.
I so move.
Thanks, Ann. A
I'll
second.
second that.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Patron comments on, any public comments on patron issues? Seeing none. I worded that all wrong. Patron comments on agenda items. Okay. Action report item, personnel report, Mr. Harris.
On the personnel report this evening, I have two recommendations for employment. One is under classified staff, recommend Peter Schoenfeld as a maintenance staff member beginning on May 1st. And then maybe one of the main ones, under extracurricular, recommendation for Shayna Williams as the head girls varsity basketball coach. And once, hopefully this, both the personnel report gets approved, then I'll move it to other people here.
Okay. I'd like to seek a motion to approve the personnel report.
I so move.
Thank you, Ann. Do I hear a second? Thanks, Ryan. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Well, now, if I could bring Andrea Van Meter up to make the introduction and
Okay.
give us a little bit more background.
Good
on
evening,
Shayna.
everybody. So I wrote it down. I don't know that I really needed to write it down, but I did write it down, so if I forget something, stop it there. Okay, so we would like to, I guess I do this in a different order, so I would like to introduce you to our candidate that you just approved her. So I'd like to introduce you to Shayna Williams. Sparks, if you knew Shayna. She is a 1998 graduate of Connersville High School and a 2001 graduate of Indiana State University. 2002, okay, I missed it. Majored in biology. Okay. Shayna was a 4-year varsity starter here under the direction of 2 years with Lori Burge and 2 years of Larry Miller. She was named on the Indiana All-Star team. She will be recognized this Saturday as a silver anniversary team member for her acknowledgments on the Indiana All-Stars, so that's fantastic. I think her passion for the game and her determination, her drive, what most of you might have seen of her as a player when she was here. She has also coached here with both the boys and the girls. She coached Dirt Road for her son for many years under Coach Brown. She's also been a freshman girls coach, a JV girls coach under, I think Thompson was the coach that was here. And then with the last coaching change, excuse me, she was on as the varsity assistant when the coach that lasted about a month was here. And then when that coaching change happened, things happened with her job and wasn't able to stay on. So we as the athletic department feel like she is the right person to put in there to bring that spark back to girls basketball, to get us back on the map, fill the seats in the bowl. I don't think she will fail. I don't think she wants to fail. She's got some big shoes to fill. She's got some great role models that she's had in the past, and I think she'll do a fantastic job for our ladies party. So with that, I will introduce you to Shayna Williams. And if you guys have any questions, or you want to, she's got some things that she can say to you as well, but thank you for approving her tonight. We are super excited in our department.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
You want to stand up and any more to add?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be able to start and looking forward to meeting all the girls and start developing a relationship with them, get a coaching staff together so we can develop these girls on and off the court. You know, my goal is to pull a product together that's not only good for girls basketball, but for our school and for our community. So I'm excited to get going and get after it tomorrow.
Shayna, who's going to take over your job, the last coaching job you had?
I don't know yet.
Oh,
That would be, I have a few people in mind.
Okay.
I'm gonna interview some people and interview the existing coaching staff now and find a good fit for everybody in that role. So,
Sheena coached middle school last year, and she did a fantastic job. And her passion for it and her knowledge was a lot of fun to watch. So that's where it has to kind of start with what you're going to be doing now, and that's fantastic. You've agreed to take the job. That's super, super, super.
thank you, I appreciate it.
One other thing I will throw in, just, not that it does anybody in this room any good, but one thing I think is maybe a little unique is that at 6:30, I believe Andrea might be leading it, but they are going to do a Facebook Live and get the word out to anybody that's on Facebook and all that in the community. So I don't want to see any phones going to Facebook here at 6:30. We have other business, but just to let you guys know, they're going to get the word out there and get the excitement started. So I think that's super.
I know the kids have been asking on like who the coach is gonna be, who the coach is gonna be. I don't know that anybody knew that she even interviewed, which was part of the excitement of putting it on Facebook Live. The girls are ready. I mean, they've been in some open gyms, but I think she's got what it takes to bring some of the kids who quit back. I really do. Hopefully we'll have a freshman team this year, so no pressure, but we haven't had one in a few years, but I think she's got what it takes to get enough girls to come out to do that too.
That's great.
And you guys are, just to share, Andrea and Shana, they played basketball together for, you guys have known each other most of your lives.
Since
But
like fourth grade probably.
When you all were, when you were number one and Martinsville number two, or vice versa, isn't there something you're planning to do this year with that as well?
Yeah, so, it probably could have been this year, but, this year will be the 25th anniversary of the first girls' basketball team going to semi-state. And so she and I were on that team in the 96-97 school year. So we're gonna honor something at one of the girls' basketball games, kind of try to pull back former players, alumni, do something with that, so. Hopefully she can pull more people than I could have by myself.
We're super excited to have you on board. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. And now on, no other business, Mr. Harris?
No, for me.
Okay. So we are on to our facility discussion for our team from Gibraltar. Welcome.
Thank you for having us this evening.
I feel like we just saw you.
I
Oh,
know we
maybe
did.
we did. I know.
You know, and I was thinking as I came in, this table is getting bigger. We have more seats, and that's good, because that means we have more thought partners to make sure that we are intentional, that we're turning over every single rock as we go through this process. So it's a good thing that we're all here today. And exciting about what we have, as you guys know, well, let's kind of review where we've been on our timeline, because it has been a journey that started in June, and we're getting close to celebrating our 1-year anniversary with all of you. We'll go on Facebook Live and announce that, I guess.
You get to bring the cake.
That's right.
Cake and punch or something?
So as we started our process in June of 2022, you know we went through the every single board meeting until November of 2022 with information about each of the facilities, from learning environments to staff input, quite a long journey. February 1st is when we came together for our first school board work session, and that is where we started to begin a conversation about the feasibility study and options and how we want to present it and how we want to move forward. Moving into March 14th, that's where our table got a little bit bigger, because bringing in our construction management partners to be able to go through and really help be an additional thought partner from the estimating and that pre-construction planning. And then moving into April 17th and 19th of last week, we had a chance with our partners at Skillman to do a deeper dive at each of the elementaries and do a walkthrough, go through the facility study that we had completed and make sure that we had some conversations about each of the schools. And then on April 19th, we had the opportunity to go visit a school that is a renovation in Shelbyville. I don't know if you guys want to share anything about that experience that we had before we move forward.
it was very enlightening on how they did it in steps and processes. It was much, it did not interrupt the educational process. There seemed to be minimal impact there. Having lived through one here a number of years ago, it was a huge impact on the kids. And the pre-planning was just remarkable. So it didn't interrupt the educational process for the kids. So that was very enlightening to me. And looking at the old facilities and then the new facilities, wow.
Yes.
I like the old ones because it brought back a lot of memories, but clearly they're not functional any longer. So thank you.
We've worked with them on numerous projects in the past, so we know what they're capable of. But it was good for you to be able to see they know what they're doing as we were going through, one of their projects. So, any other thoughts from that experience?
I think for me, just realizing that I didn't know the scope included, like, paying attention to cabinetry. And the little thing, well, here it's carpeted, but the thing, whatever you call it, that goes along the bottom of the wall. I mean, all those little details that I was thinking plumbing, electrical, those kinds of systems, and not also the finished product and how important that is too for the classroom climate, So that was something new I had not been aware of.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys for coordinating the opportunity. We appreciated it. A lot of parallels, as we talked about, a building that it had when it was built and during different decades, being able to walk through and see the different projects that had happened over the years, and they were at different stages of renovation, so it was great. Thank you. So moving forward to this evening, what we hope to accomplish this evening is go through what, we're going to review some of the content that you've seen before we get to the opportunity for Skillman to share some estimating numbers this evening, because I kind of want to just capture again what it was that they were estimating that we're bringing forward today. Plan on covering high school athletics, talk about the pool as well, and then also bringing forward what a new elementary, with all the programming that we've talked about, what that would cost in today's dollars as well. And then we plan on closing today by making sure that we are talking about the May 15th community meeting that we are planning and our objectives and outcomes for that experience. And then also set the table for the elementary feasibility options, which will close out our meeting today. Move into May 24th, that's when we plan on having a deeper discussion about the elementary options. And then June 23rd, or June of 2023, not scheduled yet, but another school board work session if we need to circle back again. And then opportunities, just looking forward for potential for future community meetings if needed. Okay, let's go to our objectives and outcomes for today. Discuss and review the importance of generational life cycle school projects. So you have a rare opportunity in front of us to really redefine what elementary learning looks like, what the elementary experience, what the high school athletic experience is. A lot of opportunities ahead. When I say generational, it means, and you talked quite a bit about the middle school project. That was a generational project. I mean, that is something that happened 20 years ago that people are still talking about in the community. So we have that opportunity ahead of us to have that same conversation about elementary schools for the next 20 years. Clear understanding of the content and intent of the upcoming community input opportunity, and then finally, that final direction for elementary feasibility options. So we will get to that as well. I'm going to always have this as a placeholder for our guiding principles, always about function. We want to make sure that you're getting the best value so that there's multiple uses for the spaces, efficiency to aesthetics to school for the future, so that you're setting your students up for not what is just happening today, but also what's going to be happening in the future in classrooms. So let's review the high school options. This is the interior, if you remember what came from our feasibility study, our assessments of learning environments. Some of the things that surfaced were solving building storage needs, underutilized spaces, creating a benchmark for classrooms and, leveling up all the learning spaces, separate parking for staff away from front entrance, strategically place common study areas, and then reimagine high-traffic stairwell near the cafeteria. Now, I wanted to have this as a placeholder to let you know we're talking about athletics today, but we did not lose sight of the inside of the high school and those needs that are there as part of a long-range master plan as well. When we get to the athletic fields, what Skillman will be bringing forward, we talked about the football stadium, the new home side grandstands, new football lockers, new visitor grandstands and locker building, new varsity and baseball field amenities, new event parking, and then looking at different pool options and how to move forward in that direction, and then a new athletic campus entry, pathways, areas for discus, and then that athletic storage maintenance slash building slash restroom slash catch-all slash Superintendent Collins' office, all those different things that can happen underneath that one roof. So we, again, making sure that you understand what's in the estimating today, but also this is what we had presented with Skillman, that we have been going back and forth with them as well to define these areas. And then this was just, a benchmark of your newest athletic property, that new softball field. And so looking at the intention behind the design and what you accomplished there, kind of set a benchmark for us for like new thinking for athletic fields at the high school. So that for us is like that standard of care for your athletic fields. And then Jim is going to walk us through the different options for that feasibility study for the pool.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So nice to be here. Really enjoyed hearing about the basketball coach too, by the way. I love learning about the communities that we serve, so it's nice to hear. So if you remember when we talked about the pool, that came up very early, and we decided to dive into that, and Mike had put together some planning. We reviewed the systems with your maintenance team, and it seemed like when you sift all that out, you get 4 ways to look at your pool in this regard. Certainly you could try to just fix what you have and get it updated. You could change what you have under option 2, do that maybe more selectively. And then if you're familiar with swimming programs today, if we were to build it new, we'd be looking at an 8-lane pool. And stretch pool means like to allow for diving to happen at the same time swimming is happening. So you're not shutting down the pool to have your divers compete and then reopening the pool for the swim lanes. So option 3 would be, how could you create that using what you have? And then of course, similar to like when we talk about what's a new elementary school cost, the conversation about what's a new pool cost. This is what you have, and the 6-lane pool, and there's just, when this was built, that's how swimming was viewed. Some of you maybe even competed in this pool, and it's a tank of water, and athletes can do very well. But when a pool ages, probably more than a normal building of classrooms, gyms, and things like that, pools are sometimes quite a headache. You can probably attest to some of that. So sometimes you end up like chasing things, like you'll think you fixed it, and then 2 years later, because of the corrosion, all the different things. And of course, old pools, we know a lot more about how to operate, maintain, and equip new pools to be more effective. If we go through the options sort of one by one quickly, this is just a partial list. If you just went through and tried to fix everything, it gets to be a pretty long list. The next option says, okay, we're going to renovate the pool, do some additions to sort of selectively work with it. And then the next option goes even further with changes. And then the last option, if we built a new pool, our current thinking would be we'd probably locate it maybe somewhere on your campus, but not necessarily physically attached to your high school. And our partners with Skillman can kind of walk you through some costs. Costs they're constantly being updated. Skillman makes it their business to know up-to-date budgeting numbers. And in today's market, I've been doing this over 30 years, I've never seen numbers change more frequently. So we're really glad to have a partner like Skillman with a robust estimating department, because every 3 to 6 months, seems like the market changes. Sometimes it goes back down in some areas. But most recently, we haven't seen long lead times for structural steel. It seems like it's coming back to normal, but at any rate, very important to keep up-to-date numbers. But with pools, they're expensive in a hurry. So there's usually a lot of sticker shock when you see things.
So as you know, some of us are visual learners and some of us like to read. One more visual, just to help wrap your mind around what we're talking about in New Elementary today. This is a New Elementary, 5 sections, has STEM, cafeteria, equipped for any needs. It usually will get to about 100,000 square feet. We'll be able to accommodate about 750 kids in that building. Usually we'll be on 20 acres of land, playground, parking, utilities, site management, and all those other needs. So when you see estimates today, I want you to kind of have a visual that we're not talking about a school that you have. It would be a school that would be 5 sections, 750 students. So pretty large elementary school.
So what are the other things that we thought might be useful for you tonight? And there'll be another opportunity or 2 opportunities. Some of you remember when we had a meeting that involved finance and legal counsel to talk about how the process works. So one of the things I want to applaud this board and your administrative leadership, and Chris and I had a conversation today about a different community that is not as transparent. And I just cannot say enough how much we can compliment you as a district to be willing to have work sessions, put things out on websites so people can find information, to not evade conversations. When you have a generational legacy project, I have seen success start right now. Every meeting you have, every conversation you have, it just built. So I just want to compliment you because we work with a lot of different communities. I won't speak for Skillman, but Gibraltar seems to be our norm, is we tend to bond quickly and work well with boards and leadership that are desiring to have communication out. So that's why we're very meticulous about how we put these presentations together, because we feel like it helps explain for those that want to learn. But it also shows that you're not just doing this out of thin air. It shows intentionality, it shows sincerity, it shows all the things that I would want my school board and my local community to be doing. And it's hard sometimes. You've got some things that we're constantly talking about, and eventually I think the right answers will reveal themselves, I think both financially and practically. But you're not there yet. You just need us to continue through this feasibility process. Eventually, we'll need to land on a hearing. So there will need to be a statement, for example, of what the educational needs are and the why. We will need to we don't need to know where every wall and door is. We don't need to know meticulous detail, but we need to generally be able to say how we're going to meet those needs. And then, there'll be scheduling, when is this going to happen, how is it managed financially. It is also, tends to be customary that you try to provide some sort of schedule. And you are required to say where you're going to do it. So you can't not say it's going to be, you have to say all the schools you're going to work on. Or if you're going to build a new one, you have to say we're going to build a new one. That's a statutory requirement. So that'll be coming up. Typically, we last experienced a little over a year ago. It seems like September and October. Randy could speak to this too, but if you want to do something that affects the next year's taxes, you need to have your hearings in September, October at the latest, because there's 30-day hoops that you got to wait 30 days, and then you have the next board action. You want to have all that done before the holidays. So this last slide, before we hand it over, when we establish a budget, I don't know if any of you remember this, but it's a kind of a 2-part visual. Elementary learning, so Scott and Chris, elementary learning, I learned this is called a manipulative. Is that right? When you have a visual?
Visual.
Yeah, manipulative. So, 2-part question. What does this represent? And why is it important to everybody in this room? Everybody, even our new partners at the table. What does this represent? Do you remember? A long time ago we said it.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember the visual.
Square foot.
Part 1 is answered. It represents 1 square foot. Why is it important?
If we have a lot of them.
The cost of it.
Thank you. Bravo.
This is the most gifted board that we.
Oh, my
It only
God.
takes 20 minutes.
Thank you. That is exactly right. It represents 1 square foot, which for our business is a unit of measure. To, like, what are we designing? How does the square foot get used? And then how much does it cost? So it can be expensive in a hurry. And you don't want to waste it, because you add up a bunch of wasted square footage, that's money that's going out the door. And then you also have to operate it, and it can be expensive to operate. And also, if it's not enough square footage, it's not going to do the functional purpose that you need for learning. So that's not lost upon Skillman Corporation, it's not lost upon Gibraltar Design and all the people that we have on our teams respectively. And we know how important this is to all of you. So this is an example of like how a hearing looks when you're presenting budgets. And it'll be important to emphasize. The other thing you'll see in yellow, just as a reminder, we like to talk in terms of construction budgets, like how much it costs to build. Please try not to forget, and we'll use our methods to remind you that there's also a soft cost with that. So you have things like land surveys and professional fees and financial stuff that you have to do, and those things cost dollars as well. So we would like to remind you of that, but the dollars typically you'll see until we're ready will just be about basic construction budget estimates. With that, I think we're ready to have some discussion about the high school and the new elementary, so we can kind of place that in the right way and then shift our focus back to elementary schools.
Well, first of all, thank you again for opportunity to come back and speak with you. Some of you met Tim Funston, but more members that didn't. Tim will be our county executive. Tim and I worked together on a number of projects, including Shelbyville, which we visited. And we're going to go through here sort of our first presentation of costs, and it certainly is our first and not our last. One of the risks in our business is whenever we put a number, everybody always remembers the first number, right? That's always the perspective. I guess I would just ask you to keep in mind that there's always a less expensive way to do something, and there's always a more expensive way to do those. What we've tried to do is give you some benchmark costs that Skillman and Gibraltar have worked together to develop, to give you, I used order of magnitude, so that to help you make decisions, because this is, we're going to work from big picture down to minute detail. We're up at 30,000 feet. We're in the airplane trying to develop costs at this point. So as the design gets refined, as your decisions get refined, the costs get refined. And so this is really sort of a first pass on some cost. Again, to repeat what Jim said, these numbers listed are construction costs. It's what we would estimate it would cost this year. And then we would add on to whatever you selected as a project or pieces of project, probably somewhere in the range of 25%. And again, I think I explained to the board last time, our cost is a construction cost, but from a budgeting standpoint, we would put our cost in that 25%. So at the end of the day, we always want to talk about total project costs, because that's what you need to get approved. That's what you would need to borrow, but it's easier to focus in on just the bricks and mortar I like to talk about. Make decisions there, and then we build the budget around it. So with that, I'm going to let Tim sort of break down what you have in front of you.
If I can just reiterate too that we've used the number 25%. Obviously, when we do things that don't require furniture, high technology or something, that percentage comes down quite a bit, right? Because furniture's not in there. Sometimes you want specific technology or those things that you guys will acquire on your own, or we'll coordinate it with you and you'll acquire it on your own. So 25% is not the sold number. We'll help track that as the projects go along. We'll keep generating budgets, give you guys updates on what we think that number is. As some of those costs become apparent to us, so for example, cost of financing would be in that 25%, we will identify what that number is and keep tracking it throughout the entire budget for you guys, wherever you settle at. So I've asked Chris to go back to the first slide because it really has kind of the visual of kind of the site plan that we've got on here. So starting at the top of the sheet for the high school, it doesn't line up exactly. I think we wanted to kind of maybe give you more options and thoughts of consideration. So you will see, for example, the very first one, new 3,700 seat football grandstands, home visitor and press box. So that's kind of like, if we could get it all, what's the number? So we've put a number on there, and then you'll see, well, what if we wanted to take a look at, see if we could repair those bleachers and maybe do, more of a kind of a budget thought process through that. So those numbers, you'll see those numbers kind of broken down as you go through here. So, and Mike has given us a few extra items that probably aren't going to be listed in this 1 through 7. But all inclusive, it's kind of an a la carte list. It's, if you pick this one, you don't have to pick the next one. So really it's kind of a thought process as we keep going through, and we'll get to the elementaries and we'll come back and visit this and see what type of scope maybe that you guys want to select to move forward. But I'll keep going down. A new 3,000 square foot football, baseball, visitor locker room building. We just took 3,000 square feet right now. I mean, that's just kind of a high level view for us, without understanding how many players or students or what type of sports you're gonna have in it. 3,000's, it's just a number for right now. Not really understanding surveys of, utilities and things that you do or do not have available. We just we've placed a number on it. 1,000 square foot concession and restroom building. That is behind the baseball field, if I remember correctly. And it would look similar of quality and style as the picture that Chris showed for the softball fields. Replace the fence around the track. That's really just kind of a vinyl fence upgrade, I believe. The discus and the pad and cage, that's on there, number 6, I believe, up on the screen. Varsity baseball fields, natural turf. So when we say natural turf, I want everybody to understand that's grass. It's not actual turf, artificial material. Usually if we refer to artificial turf, we say artificial turf. So natural turf is grass. And a press box. Varsity baseball athletic lighting, we broke that out separately because obviously you could pick and choose that as we go through the projects. Replace existing baseball field, fencing, dugouts, and press box. That's, I would say, replacing them so they're brand new, right?
And that's natural turf, right?
That's natural turf, yes, thank you. Event parking, so that's the kind of the number 3 up on the screen. Once again, we took about 134 cars, and so that would obviously be some connecting pieces also that would account for the striping, any of the earthwork underneath, soil prep, drainage. And then we have athletic campus entry and pathways. Now we've set a varies to that. Obviously, you can have brick walls and fences and ornate things. You can have ticket booths and whatnot. So we kind of just left that as you can go up here, or you can just try to figure out what your minimum needs are. Any questions on the site? I kind of went through that really fast, but it kind of maps what we've been talking about on the Gibraltar presentation.
Is that event parking, is that upgrading our current parking?
No, literally just that number 3 up there, building new.
It'll be additional parking to what you have.
Be right by the baseball field. To the left as you go in. That's what they did, I think.
I think the one thing that I'd like to add is, so think of it as like a shopping list, and think of it as something that we Now we can see it, now we can name some things, and now we can generally know what kinds of costs there are. Our feeling was that, and this is just my observation, but the context by which these decisions are made is after you have another budget in front of you that talks about elementary schools and information from Randy and the finance team that say, this is our total ability to spend. But I really like the term like order of magnitude, because what it says to me is, hey, yeah, we could build all new, we kind of see what that would look like, and I think that kind of came up with baseball. The idea would be, hey, let's keep existing baseball the way it is, but let's build an all new baseball, and what would that look like? But whenever this is, a month, 2 months from now, we may go back and look at the shopping list and say, maybe we ought to just fix what we have. And that'll be your decision, decide.
And could it be, could there also be a mixture of anything that, for instance, our construction trades group can construct for us?
Yeah, sometimes your budget, when you get down the road, you realize either not right now or by other means, which is what
Okay.
you just said. Okay, we're going to remove
Right.
that from a bond issue, and we're just going to do by other means.
Because they actually were in charge of building the current press box out at, for the softball field. They were involved in that and the dugout areas, which saved us a tremendous amount of money on labor costs.
Okay. And that's how you'll use this list.
And it was a source of pride for them.
Yeah, and that's a great way to use this list, to say, let's, like I said, by other means. But you may have, it's been a while since I've seen a trades class take on something, but it seems like sometimes, depending on the community, if you don't have access to certain types of construction equipment, you may say to the Skillman Gibraltar team, build the building pad, pour the concrete with the foundation, and then let us build the rest of it. So is this?
Or maybe any associated infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's what we did with that. The foundation and the block walls were done outside of.
With the contractor?
Yeah. And they did all the wood framing and electrical.
It's clever, and then you think years, like driving back by to show their kids or show their family
Yeah.
what they were a part of.
They built this building years ago.
Can they do a pool? Does anyone ask?
Let's go to the next numbers, right? Go to the pool.
Yeah.
Go ask Steve if he can handle, if the WCC can handle that.
Just reiterating what Chris said, concrete was my thing when I was younger, and my kids are probably, I drive them nuts. And it's like, hey, I poured that entry right there. I'll go through a subdivision where we
Like,
get a
yeah,
bunch of
yeah,
driveways.
Dad,
Yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Great, Dad, keep driving.
On line 3, on here, the football/baseball visitor locker building,
Yep,
that's all one building?
yes,
That'd be the idea.
correct.
And that would take the place where the existing building's at?
We'd have to decide where it would go. Operationally, if you need the existing to stay, then we'd have to find a different location for the new.
It was discussed putting it on the other side of the football field, one of the options, I think. And then just putting I think that's what you talked about, and then doing the concession and restroom building where the current locker room is. I know that was one thing that you guys discussed, if I remember it, as an option.
And you would, think of the next steps as, once we circle back to this after elementary and bond budget discussion, and you say, we do want to do 1, 2, or 5 on this list, there'll be a meeting where we'll say, okay, let's talk about exactly where it'll be, is it the right size, and then, as the Skillman Corporation said, adjust the budget accordingly, so that it's aligned with your intentions.
It could be you only need 2,000 square feet. We just chose 3,000 because once again, we don't know how many lockers, how many toilets, what's inside the bag.
Yeah, and you may tell us, the other thing that drives that is, of course, the plumbing and the showers and all those things, and you may tell us you have a different idea of what should be in the building.
I don't know if now's the time or not, but the event parking at $1 million, 938. I can't see it. I don't see the need for it. To me, it'd be a $1 million luxury to build a new parking lot.
And I think these are, this is, it feels like a shock to see all these, but I think we need to remember this is just what you put together from high end, and there may be even a lower end, obviously, So, it's the first time that we've really seen some numbers on some things.
And we need to.
Yeah,
But I think this is one of those, Mark, and I agree with you on this, that after we get this, that we're gonna have to have an internal work session, just our group, school board here, get some, Randy with some financial numbers, so we can look at this from
I agree, absolutely.
budget.
Numbers do make a difference, because then you might determine, like, if you reprioritize about what's more important, because
Sure.
new lockers might be way more important than, new parking.
Correct.
we have a finite amount of money to work with, unless somebody wins the Powerball. Then we can maybe afford all this stuff, but in the meantime, we have a finite amount of money to work with, and we want to give the best bang for our buck, obviously.
Absolutely.
And I would add, most times, the board will come back and say, here are our 2 or 3 priorities, and here's how much money we want to spend. Skill in Gibraltar, go give it, maximize those dollars based on this priority. But you wouldn't want us to spend time designing and exploring an event parking area to refine that number if that's not as important as a locker room. And that's why we sort of need to put a number out there to start the process, and then we come back. And if you said our number 1 priority was event parking, but I'm not spending $1 million, then we go to Gibraltar and say, okay, maybe we could get 100 parking spaces. Here's the design, here's the storm drainage, the earthwork, and we come back and say, here's a much more refined number.
And also, Gibraltar, I'm assuming, or maybe Skillman, I don't know who's gonna come back to us and say, okay, from a needs basis, you really need this. This other, that would be great if you've got the money to do it, but we're telling you from a systems approach, like HVAC or plumbing or whatever it is, this is really in trouble and you need, we would recommend that. So I'm assuming we're gonna get that.
Yes.
too.
But I think Jeremy's right too, that once we get figures like we have today, this group needs to sit down and maybe we need to prioritize individually and then
Right.
collectively and then go from there.
Yeah.
And I think something to remember too on this is, the parking lot isn't a high priority in my world, but it's some things that they looked at the site where we're deficient in areas, but keep in mind, we have 5 elementaries that need work, and like Loper, and that's gonna be a standard that I think the board will wanna set. What is our learning standard in each classroom?
Right.
Same as at the high school, so
Yes.
those are gonna take some major dollars too,
Right.
outside Lawrence Athletics.
What are we looking at as a total? 30 million, did that number come out? Is that what was in my head? That we're going to spend on this effort? So these-
That's approximate.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be having another meeting probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks with the finance portion to, again, for them to refine it. Last time we met was probably 5 or 6 months ago, so that'll be also refined based on, well, the interest rates have went up or bondings went down, and so that will also change those types of numbers a little bit.
But it's my understanding, Randy, that the school corporation financially is in good shape at this particular point in time. So whatever that top figure turns out to be around $30 million or so, that's going to be, it's not gonna, it's something we can handle because of how we've done things in the past.
Whatever I bring to you, we're gonna be able to handle it.
Okay.
It'll be part of our debt service that we're keeping.
Yeah,
Right.
well, yeah, because part of our debt service is gonna go off this year, so we've got that extra money to spend.
And don't forget, and I know you guys have been very good about it, but I haven't heard it tonight. Also, don't forget, not only does this group need to meet and refine whatever, but there's gonna be a bigger group in 3 weeks of the community may say, I'll just keep harping on the parking a little bit, because I really agree with Mark, but somebody may say, well, I've got elderly grandparents that they really want to see their grandson play football, and the parking's terrible, and we need, but, so we're also going to get community input in all of this also, that I think is going to affect all of us.
I just want to say that every time I hear we're in good shape financially, I cringe. Because I think that means we're able to go ahead and spend money. And I just don't like that mindset. I respect, what I'm getting from Randy, but I don't like that attitude. Like, we're in good shape. Let's be real cautious about the shape we're in. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think that you're kind of talking about two different things, because one, you're talking about maintaining the same debt level, so that we can receive the same money as a taxing unit. That's separate, I think, also from just the financial condition of the school corporation
The
at
day-to-day
large.
expenses.
That's separate, as I see it. So maybe we just need to be careful how we word that the pot of money, whatever pot of money that is that we end up having, is maintaining our debt service amount, our percentage for taxes. So we're not taking money from general fund or other locations. So I think that, we can make that clear.
I think that will be important to come out at the community session, because as we've discovered with other things, there is a misconception of how the money is spent, and it has to be spent from certain funds, and it's not like your personal finances where you can move things around at will. A public corporation like us just can't do that. So I think that that's a misunderstanding, a big misunderstanding. Like, why did we build a field house and we don't give teachers a better a raise? Well, because they come from different funds, and you can't just move them back and forth like you do in your personal life.
Okay, Tim, can you jump us in the pool?
Yeah, absolutely. Refresh your memory of kind of what you see here, and then on the next slide is the list we took from Gibraltar and said, okay, how deep of a refresh would we do on the pool? And so that's kind of this option one, fix and update existing. And so we've taken into consideration all those line items and kind of put it into this number to what we feel would be a generational refresh, right? So you're going to take your pool, how do we make it last another 25 to 30 years? That option one would do that. Now that means though that you're not expanding the lanes or anything. So that's kind of option two. So if you keep the 6 lanes and we refresh it with the equipment, tile, put in the new gutter system that's required, fix the leaks, lighting, the touch pads, kind of an all-in high number until we really dive in. That's what that $5 million will get you there.
And that also goes beyond into the filtration room on the lower level and all the problems that are in that part of the building too.
HVAC, we talked about HVAC on the phone,
Yeah.
so just like we kind of looked at the classrooms the other night, that's what you would anticipate for the pool. type of thing.
What's the life expectancy, 20 to 25, you think, out of that?
Yeah, I mean, the pool equipment is the tough one, right?
Sure.
Usually those are just a little bit shorter than kind of some of the rooftop units and whatnot, so you can get 30 out of them, but you'll probably start to have to work on them at 20. So option two would be expanding to 8 lanes, so going from 6 to the 8 that you see here, and kind of coming picture south, I'm going to say on the plan there, so the seating would come out towards the parking lot and your central circle there. Once again, same thing as option one, just building upon that. Obviously, there's kind of a big height difference there that we have to have a challenge to deal with, and also the stairs to nowhere we would adjust or look at, but that would get you the 8 lanes and kind of get you up to what the Indiana new pool standards would be per se.
And keep in mind, there's no separate diving. You still have to stop a swim meet to have your diving events with an 8-lane pool. It doesn't change how you run a swim meet.
Is this adding on to the existing pool, or is this ripping out the existing pool and making it 8-lane, building a new pool in there?
This would be pulling down the wall and expanding it. So you're still
You still got the
using
existing pool, you're just adding a new section.
as much as you can, correct?
If you think about the box that holds the pool, we're taking one side off and stretching it out.
That's what I
In
mean.
the box that's holding the water, we're emptying the water out, taking one side off and pulling it out, 8 lanes, and putting it back together.
Okay.
But within this, I want to, I guess the point to put on this option 2 would include the bad portions of option 1, right? So you're gonna go, we're still gonna fix the leaks, the equipment, all of those things are really kind of, you'll get the new deck. Then this is the delta, I should say the delta, this is the price to include the expansion on top of that. So 10 million all in to fix everything and get the 8 lanes.
Would we gain deck space?
A little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
You would
Just
gain
on the
deck-
one side.
You'd gain deck
Just on
space
the south side, you know,
south
right.
side, yeah.
Which is the biggest place that needs more deck space.
Well, we really need it on the end, because that's where all, like, when you have your 16 invitationals, that's where they come in at, and it gets a little crazy. I mean, Leslie knows we've had club meets, and it gets nuts down there, so.
Yeah, nowadays, the meets, the starting end of the pool is the deep end of the pool, like in your end, is gonna be, it's where your diving well is. And if you notice, there's not a lot of deck space there. So when you're doing relays and stuff like that, you could, in a swim meet, you can literally have hundreds of kids on the deck, and it can get pretty tight, and you probably can contest to that.
And we still couldn't host a sectional with that pool. Because there's no cool down and warm up lanes like they have at most of them. So you couldn't host a sectional or a big meet like that because you don't have the cool down where you can cool down and warm up and get ready. And
In a pool like this, they would use 7 lanes for competition, and they'd have 1 lane left open for warm down and warm up. So like Daryl's saying, it'd be really hard to run an invitational because you just don't have enough lanes. It doesn't have the flexibility that maybe a stretch pool has.
So option 3 is we keep speaking about the stretch, or 25 stretch, is that okay? What we're talking about here. 25, we're talking about the distance of the main pool, and then stretch being the diving well portion of it. And so what Mike's laid out here is obviously rotating it, and then this would have a, help me out, in the middle, Mike, to separate.
The bulkhead.
Bulkhead,
Yeah.
thank you.
What you're looking at here is an 8-lane stretch pool running north and south, and with 1 movable bulkhead. You would have 8 lanes, and then on the diving end, we would design this for both 1 and 3 meter diving. 3 meter diving is good. I don't know if you've got a program how successful your diving is, but they use the 3 meter board to help train for 1 meter diving. So you would need a certain depth, and so the depth from the bulkhead to the south wall is about 40, 42 feet. So this represents a pool that's long enough for both 3 meter diving and 25-yard competition. The deck space around it is more generous. We usually put the starting end or shallow end of the pool near the locker rooms. We don't like to see the deep end of the pool near the locker room, so when you come out, especially if you use it for community use, you got small kids, you want them around the shallow end of the pool. So the shallow end of the pool will be on the north end of this diagram here. Spectator seating on the west side look at that as more of an elevated seating with a cross aisle. It'd probably be elevated enough so we could use the underneath side of the seating for storage, pool storage, because you can see this diagram has no room in it for storage, pool storage, and you'll need a lot of it. And then with that comes an entrance to the pool on the south end. You extend your corridor from the high school down, and then because of the grades out there, you know how the way it slopes, you're going to have a series of ramps and stairs on the south end where the community entrance is.
Am I to assume if you take the bulkhead out, you can run your lanes opposite and have 50 meters, or no? No.
Wouldn't be that long.
You could run a 25 meter.
Yeah, yeah.
And the bulkhead's nice because it separates and you can do a learn to swim program in that area also. And they don't have to swim as far.
Are you all familiar with the bulkhead? It's like the white floating platform that runs across the floor.
And then they also use the diving well for warm downs and warm ups, so they don't have to be 25 yards across the warm up, warm down, so they can use the diving while they're using the competition pool.
And then we had, unless there's questions, then we had option 4, which was kind of like the new community natatorium center. You'll see a line item on the bottom there. That price includes to infill the old pool. So this pool box would be somewhere on your campus, like you were saying earlier. And then obviously dollars inside that budget to make it into a multi-purpose area, like weights facility.
Yeah, at one time there was some discussion, maybe if it was filled in, you could do your performing arts expansion improvements in that end of the building. That was some discussion, but yeah, the pool could be filled in, could be anything you wanted to use.
A weight room is needed.
Well, I think you could also expand that to the theater, the band, I mean, a few things that they'd have some room to practice in too when it was raining outside. And I think your new pool would bring in your weight room, but
Scott would remember at Avon Intermediate School, that was exactly what they did. They created a multi-purpose room, which I think we used for both sports and performing arts, and just an additional large space for students to gather.
One of the things that I think the budget can help you with, again, think of it as we'll put this in the parking lot, we know where we left it, and then we'll come back to it. But when we come back to it, I think the conversation's gonna start with, where do you want to be with the pool for the next 25 years? And then from there, timing, right? Are we gonna be addressing it now? Or do we look more at just fixing what we have and be ready then for the next step in the future for the pool? Because I think when you get into the pool, we just felt like these options, while they're big numbers and they range dramatically, the first number's not even a fourth of the bigger number. We felt like you wanted to see the whole range, because as we travel the state and do all these pools and fix pools for people, that's what you want to know. It's a little bit like if you didn't, if a school board didn't know anything about tracks and they build a 6-lane track, because that's what they remember in the past, and then people come to your school and say, well, everybody's got an 8-lane track, why did you only do 6? Well, we didn't have the money, so we feel like you got to see, and know ahead of time where your goals are, so.
And I thought the same thing from a pool, whatever the destination is for the next few years for the pool, there's someone that's probably gonna come back and say, why didn't you just build a new pool? And so the more information that we bring to you, we just wanna make sure you guys are asking questions that you know that your patrons would ask and your public would ask, and we bring that information, make sure that we turn over everything and discuss it.
In this option 1, is this like the bare minimum of items that need done? I mean, that are very important?
Think of option 1 as a brand-new pool built back 30 years ago. Brand new. So when you're said and done, this pool, like Tim saying, is going to be 25, 30 years. The only things you might be having to do is maintenance things, like with the pool filtration equipment, maybe the dehumidification system, in 15, 20 years from now. But the actual pool itself, the gutter, the deck, the walls around it, everything is there. It's lifetime.
So I guess what I'm getting at right now, I know there's issues now, is there anything less that can be done with it now to avoid this expense to keep it going?
Yes, so that's,
I mean,
that's a very good question. That's kind of what I was trying to say, when we come back to this, the very first question we're gonna ask is, how long, if you want to spend less money, the next question would be, looking at the first option is, how long do you want to make this last until you must address it again? And that goes straight to then, how many items on that list would we recommend you do right now to say it differently, like you wouldn't want the pool to shut down.
Keep it usable.
Yes.
Right.
But that does mean that some things would not be done. And you might spend $1 million, you might spend $1 million or $1.5 million. And somebody will go into that pool and say, you spent $1,500,000 and it looks exactly the same. And that would be true, because everything we did was like with filtration equipment and things to keep it operational.
But it's keeping it
You say-
going.
But it's
keeping
open.
it usable.
But it's open, right? So that's where
Right.
we want you to be
Right.
very well equipped. But then your next comment might be, yes, but when we can afford to address the pool, and we think that might be in 5 years, we want to do this. What do you think about doing that? And see what they say. So, yeah, you test those. So that's, when we come back, that's what we'll be wanting to hear from you about, is like, we think we can only do this with the pool. I think implied with this is, yes, you can get it like a brand new pool, as Mike said, from 30 years ago, but you wouldn't want to do that. But somebody's gonna ask, how much would it cost to fix everything we have? So now you have that answer. But you'd very quickly say, but that's not a good investment, because why would we spend all this money to continue to have a 20-year pool that's out of date with number of lanes, out of date with how our swimming athletes and students need it? So, yeah.
But if we go to option 2, that's 1/3 of our total budget.
Right.
Could be, yeah.
Right.
And so, which tells me that proceed cautiously. Like, I wouldn't be trying to let people think that you're gonna jump right into doing a new pool. That is,
But I think if we can show that we have, this is what we have the money to do right now to make it functional. We know we're gonna have to do things down the road, we just can't do them now. You budget in your own homes to do the same kinds of things.
Exactly.
So it'll be something
You
we
got it.
understand.
Okay, moving to the new elementary.
So what we did here, given, we don't know where this site's gonna be, considerations for interior finishes, terrazzo floors are a different cost at 100,000 square feet than, VCT or LVT. So we've just kind of given a range of what we think the low and the high end would be, based upon what our database is recently. So Victor might be able to speak about the number of elementary schools in the past couple of years that we've kind of priced out.
It's been interesting because 10 years ago, I don't think we had a recent new elementary in a database, but in the last 5 years, there's been quite a bit that we've done. And we've done new schools in Crown Point and Carmel. We've also done, just did a new school in Scott County, Austin, which is a very small, conservative school corporation. And so the range has been significant between those new schools because of the client, because of the size, because of the finish, because of the architect. There's a lot of variables. So it's kind of like asking what's a new car cost. That's how it is to answer the question, what's a new elementary cost? So we really give you a pretty broad range based on these parameters that you brought.
Does Scott County have like Pepsi or some big corporation down there? Because they're not
Not
high
Scott.
poverty, super high poverty. Did they do a referendum? Do you know?
Scott County did a referendum.
Okay.
Talk about a generational project. This one included tearing down a turn-of-the-century high school that was functioning as their elementary. They were spread out between multiple buildings, so their new elementary costed a little bit around $20 million, which is pretty unheard of, but they used the gym from the old building and used parts of some other classroom wings, so.
Well, because I know they're real high poverty areas.
Yeah,
so I wondered
you're
where
right,
they-
they're
yeah.
Title I schools.
Rising referendum fast.
If we were to go with this option, it would obviously entail moving a lot of kids and not using some of the facilities we have now. And because most of our elementary schools now are what? Well, the bigger ones are about, 300 kids? Yeah, so you're talking doubling the size, and bigger isn't always better, teaching-wise, kid-wise, facility-wise. So that would be really a pretty much quantum shift as to where we are now and the feasibility of that. You know, when we build an elementary school that's gonna take the place of 2 or 3 of ours, well, what happens to the 2 or 3? And that would be very problematic, I think, in this community to do that.
And I want to preface, there's no plan to build a new school.
No, there's not.
It's just, they wanted to show what a new building would cost. And that's really, I want the public to understand that there's no plan here
No.
to do that.
No.
And in the same interest of the exercise with the new natatorium is, you know, at some point you're putting this much money into X school, you know, why wouldn't you just build a new school? Well, you have information to know a new school today, this size would be about this.
I might add that Shelbyville did the exact same. I remember making the very similar presentation. They were evaluating, if you remember, we spent between $10 and $12 million at Colston and Loper, and the board asked the same question, well, what does a new building cost if we're going to spend this much here? And so we wanted to give you that information up front.
Well, that's what we faced 20 years ago. How much would a new middle school cost out on this campus as opposed to refurbishing the old one? And it was pretty well, we don't build a new school, we fix the old one, which was what basically the community decided to do for a variety of reasons. So we would be facing the same kinds of things here.
We would, but we gotta keep our eyes open to all options here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of details here and that,
No,
play a
absolutely.
role, and there's a lot of variables that would play a huge role that would impact us financially. I don't want to stress that, but I got some ideas on that.
Well,
so.
and I agree with you 100%, because in retrospect, and having been through the renovation and been in that building, it probably would have been the wiser choice back then. But keeping parts of the building, keeping the bowl and the like, but the community was just incredibly against that. So they did the renovations, and 20 years down the road, they're facing some of the same problems that they had prior to the renovations that were done in the early 2000s. So looking a little bit differently, but I think, I agree with Jeremy, I think that those are the kinds of things we really have to consider to make it more.
And really, when we look at our elementaries, we repurposed Maplewood. That was a win with the preschool, I believe. I think the board made a really good decision on that. Eventually, we're gonna get to the point where, it's hard as someone who lives in this district to see, don't close my school, close their school, and that's just school pride, and that's normal, but, we already have discrepancies in our class sizes that are becoming pretty significant again, because two-section buildings aren't the best way to create equity in schools. And so, some of our schools, we're seeing 16 kids in a class, which is great. We have 27 in the same grades in some other schools. And so it's going to be a continuous battle to try to balance, because where do we move people to try to fill a building where that's the challenge that this board's going to have down in the future. And it's hitting us now again with the declining enrollment.
Well, and the logistics, because our corporation involves so many square miles and distances, it makes transportation difficult. You don't want a 5-year-old on a bus for an hour and a half in the morning, and then expect them to do well in kindergarten. That's just not going to happen. But that can happen if somebody lives clear up on the north end of the county and they have to be transported down to the south end of the county, or east, west, either direction. So, yeah, that does create a lot of incredible logistic problems for us that we're going to have to deal with.
Well, I think we're gonna have to look at busing, because right now we have like certain rooms, certain classes that are closed at Fed Central, so we have to take them somewhere else. And then they got places closed, we're taking them somewhere else. I mean, it's a lot of extra busing that we're doing right now that we could save a lot of money on.
Yeah.
And time.
Exactly.
That's a good point. So it's a great transition if you think about it. We have half the answers to the tests. and we need to set the stage for the rest of the answers that we'll bring forward at the next work session. So we want to talk about the different elementary options, and just as a reminder, the elementary school learning environments, this was a collective of principal input, our input, what we pulled from staff input as well, but we try to create kind of like a benchmark of the common things that surfaced at each of the schools through our conversations. We created this summary matrix that also talked about the facilities. So, not only do you get excited about refreshing a classroom, you can't refresh a classroom if you're addressing HVAC, electrical, and all those other items that need to happen in this building. And so create this matrix just to simplify our studies so that we aren't going through 50 slides for each of the schools. And then also the learning environments, those common things that came up across at each of those schools. As we go into the elementary considerations for discussion, what we're hoping to accomplish right now is that if there is, for example, we know now what 2 new elementary schools would cost. So we have the answer to that test if it were 2 700-plus size schools. Here's some of the other options that we're exploring. So if you look at that first option, it's all 5 elementary improvement options. So it's creating this baseline of what you would do at every single school, and then working with Skillman. Mike has his like sketches of each of the schools, goes back to Skillman. They're back and forth to kind of fine tune what that estimate would be for each of the elementary schools. And that would be just a baseline. And we know that there's going to be some variations. I remember walking through and seeing the gym, and then seeing the gym at Loper Elementary, and then you compare it to gyms that you have. We might have new variations that come along the way. And so know that this isn't just a stopping point, it's just a beginning point of exploration for the elementary schools. And then moving forward, looking at a 3 school improvement option. So do you look at a master plan for 3 existing schools? Randy said it best in our last work session, and it was a pretty simple math problem. And he was saying there's 5 schools and there's $30 million. That tells you how much you can spend at every school. If there's 4 schools, that tells you how much you can spend at each school. So wanted to
That
look.
is not including the high school.
Not including the high school or any of the
athletics or any of that.
Yes. Thank you, Leslie, for making it more complicated.
More depressing.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes the truth does that to us.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
So the 3 school improvement options, so looking at the master plan for 3 existing schools and the program that would go there and what would the cost be for that. And then looking at a 2 school improvement option that's taking 2 existing schools and master planning those to be programmed for $750 and have all of those like learning environment functions that would need to happen in those spaces. And so want to open this up for discussion, because in the interest of where you want us to put our energy before the next board work session, is there something here that we need to discuss from these different options before we bring them forward next month?
No, but I do have a question about the layout you had for a new.
Mhm.
If you could go to that slide.
Yes.
It was an overview of it, map per se.
Yes.
So I see you said that 20 acres of land. Does it truly require 20 acres?
No. So if you see here, there is going to be some additional to the school that you look at detention and retention and drainage and all of that has to happen. If there, in this case, there was some extra land for community use, if that was a possibility. So 20 acres, I'll let you guys speak to the exacts. But
So 20 acres, we get asked all the time, hey, our board needs to look for land. What number of acres should we look for? So we always say 20 acres. Our experience, what I would share with you is when the site gets like 10, 12 acres, you'll start to be making compromises. So
In what way?
you'll have maybe a 2-story building. You might have challenges with parking when you have events like Grandparents' Day. You can't put all the parking on the site unless you have neighboring.
But is that like example of that, like if it's an elementary and we went to a 2-story versus a 1-story building, what's the negatives to a two-story versus, I mean, I can see some of the stairs and stuff, but.
It's not necessarily big negatives, but some feel like elementary schools should be on one level. Typically, you put like the 4th and 5th grade on the second floor. But the two-story building isn't saving you acres. It might save you 1 acre. I wouldn't think of two-story as like but
But like on this here, I see it says youth soccer fields. Is that a?
Oh, yeah, you would, well, the point being, you'd have this land available if you're buying it new. If somebody was only gonna be able to say a 15 works. We've done several
But we
15
could, it
acres.
sounds like we could probably easily get by with 10 or 12.
I wouldn't say easily get by. If it's the wrong shape, if it's not if it's a real skinny site, that's, so.
I was gonna add, we get involved a lot in this sort of due diligence of buying, purchasing land. And Jim's absolutely right, you start out at 20, but all of a sudden there's a utility easement. And there's an area that's unbuildable because of some
Soil
situation. And so better to start out at 20, looking for 20, and then we can do some analysis to find out.
The best suggestion I could make on number of acres would be look at, in the presentation we gave you last year, we inventoried your acreage. So you could take your current schools, look at the acres you have, and probably get a sense of, did that site feel crowded or not crowded, based on those acres? That would be the best way to, I do think that by comparison, that would give you a sense of how many acres would satisfy this board's thought.
Well, and for an elementary school, you need more green space, because you
People
have
tend to like it, more green space is likable, but you have urban schools that people love without green space.
But green space has been an issue with particularly the middle school, because there is none contiguous to the property. So to get green space, we have to walk one way or the other way.
Right.
And with an elementary school, particularly with the kinds of things that are involved, it says use soccer field, to have fields of space available for other activities that elementary schools typically get involved in would be important.
Chairman, I think it's a good question, but like in this case, you select the site and then we design the site on what you can do with that site. In this case, this school system wanted to separate their car riders were a big issue. They wanted to separate car riders from buses, separate from the front of the building. So they wanted a space that they could spread out and not have that congestion.
So would that automatically affect the traffic flow right off the bat if we got smaller? Because we have a lot of traffic flow problems now.
Yeah, we do.
Is that going to?
Yeah, it's definitely a give and take. So I would say if the board, like the first thing is, Victor said, like if the board's saying, we think we would like to actually go a couple steps further with a new school, start to tell us, well, where you might be thinking about. We don't even have to go to those sites, and no one has to know, I mean, other than we just look at a Google image, look at the property line that the surveyor says is the land, and we can take something like this and lift it up and put it back down on whatever properties you would have in mind. Remember too, probably the other driver, I don't know that I've seen where the number of acres purchased or used is the biggest site driver. It's, for what I've seen, it's always the utilities, how you get sewer and water and gas and all those things to the site, if it's not really available, and then the stormwater. In today's building environment, Indiana doesn't want to see you push all your water out into the streets and neighboring yards. You have to be able to manage the stormwater, which is why you see all these detention ponds and stuff in new builds. Is that helpful to kind of get a picture of how new?
Yeah.
So,
Good.
Assuming we didn't have this bond falling off and we had, we had issues, whether we had you guys come in or not, let's just say our facilities folks told us, hey, you really need, this building absolutely needs this item. We would have to find that through capital projects, right? Like if a cooling system went out in the building and it was shot, we'd have to come up with that money through capital projects. Operations, yeah. So I think when we get down to the specifics, when you guide us as to what is really in rough shape in a particular building, that could be something that all on its own we were gonna have to finance at some point without a bond. Do you understand what I'm saying? That, you know, because things go up, you know, if my furnace goes out at home, you know, I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and figure out how to pay for that. I'm not gonna necessarily take out a loan to do that. But I might take out a loan for house remodeling and it would include that. So I'm just saying that when we get down to this, I think we need to know from you all what things operationally are just not, and I know Daryl and Jimmy are gonna add to that conversation, but what just really is a struggle to keep going. And then I think we also need to have a conversation about, you know, does it all have to be used with bond money? Do we have any operations money that we would be using to fix those things? I realize if we use bond money, then that's gonna free up some of our operations money that might have gone to fixing those things. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'm trying to figure out why, I can't figure it out, but I'm gonna need to know what is really in dire shape that you all would say, you know, you cannot fix this, but you're gonna be dealing with this in the next 2 years, like soon. This thing isn't gonna last. That's what I think I need to know to be able to make a decision, so that then we look at, you know, how would we have paid for that if we didn't have the bond? So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just where my brain went when looking at the previous, just looking at the summary of needs matrix, and there are some.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because what will come forward in the estimating, let's say it's in the all 5 elementary option, what you'll see is that even though we have that benchmark that we're getting to for each of the schools, the pathway may be different and the solutions might be different and the cost is going to be different, because it might take more at one school because there are those dire needs, whereas, you know, for example, a media center refresh at Everton doesn't have to happen, so that price tag is going to be different than some of the other schools. So you'll see that variation when the matrix those, you know, are applied, you know, to that 5-school option.
And the warm-up for what, so if you remember the black boxes that were on the list, much more detailed than the checklist, but that is speaking to where those dollars need to be spent, that you know, those are no longer hidden surprises.
Right.
Now you can see them coming. Now you just need to know how much and how they fit with your overall budgeting.
The one that got to me was the number of electrical outlets. And I counted them when we were in Shelbyville, the difference between the old rooms and the new rooms. Amazing. And if technologically, if we're going to be able to not have things that look like out of our grandmother's house with 17 plugs in them, then we have to address those and how that's going to impact our learning environment. That would seem to be something that any school that needed those, we needed to get done, just to make the classroom environment more workable for the teachers and for the kids. And then looking at the electrical to see if that plug is going to hold all of those things without causing issues. So there are some things we just can't ignore because they're going to cause a lot of problems down the road, or even short term.
And messaging that to the public will be important.
The visit to Loper, which I enjoyed, thank you. But what was the time frame for that, Reno?
As far as how long did we schedule to do the entire renovation?
On that school?
That school was 21 months.
It's roughly 2 years.
And that was driven entirely by how many extra rooms that they could set aside per phase. If you remember, there were 6 phases. Each phase is roughly 3 months. So 6 times 3 is 18. Well, we had some that were a little longer than 3 months. So And that was driven by the fact that the building had to be maintained, occupied, and we had to move people out, move people in. So all those variables took into that.
That's okay, I was just kind of ballpark. And then, like that example of building a new elementary, what's the time frame on something like that?
About, we're benchmarking about 20 months to build a new elementary school.
So the timeframe is very similar.
Yes.
You know, one thing I'll mention about the Loper project that I had kind of an aha moment driving home that night is they had a pretty major lift in the early 2000s when they expanded their cafeteria, expanded their gym, and expanded their office area in that front entrance that we went into. So there were some parts that they did, 15, 20 years ago that they didn't have to do in this round. This round was just focusing on the classrooms. So are we comfortable with and the way I look at this is we'll be able to look at it going, vertically so that we'll be able to see what the cost would be for those 5 going down. And then also if we did the 3 school improvement option, 2 school improvement option.
I do have a question on that. If you went to the 3 school or 2 school option, would that be renovating or would that be addition and renovating?
So the 3 school improvement option and the 2 school improvement option would be renovation and addition. So think about option 3 with the pool. It's a stretch and a new feel. So yeah, there would be, when you think about if you go to 2 schools or 3 schools, you're going to have 600 kids or 700 kids. There's going to be some other factors of the building that would need to be enhanced, from a cafeteria, serving capacity, gym, all those different things.
So I think one of the things when I was hearing you talk about, I call them almost like the must-dos. Like, if I were in your shoes, let's say 2 years from now, boiler breaks at this school, and you're in the middle of doing this bond issue, and the boiler didn't make the list for whatever reason, people would be asking like, well, wait a minute, you're renovating these 2 schools, but over here, this boiler broke, did you not know that was coming? So I almost feel like what I hear you saying, so Chris was pointing out, like what the Skillman and Gibraltar team want to do is think about option 1 with the pool. Like if you just want to fix what you have, that means no walls and doors are changing, no gyms are getting bigger, no cafeteria sizes are changing. We're just making the current asset like new. That I feel like you want to hear that and say, okay, 5 schools like new. What's this cost? And then and make sure we benchmark that with. Like we said, we're very conscientious of what does each square foot have. Well, we can do a decent carpet, decent walls, you mentioned base. It can be a nice looking school, but it can be frugal as well. It does not want long-term maintenance, but you don't want to do that with extravagant expense. But I also hear you saying we might need to be ready to say, well, if the mission is going to be to touch all 5 schools, for whatever reasons, what must we do at all 5 schools?
Right.
Even if we don't renovate,
Right.
even if we don't make classrooms look new and fresh, we're going to need to put electrical in there. We can come back later and make the rooms look new, but we're going to need to get electrical. And I feel like that's what you're asking of us as well, is like, there's sort of a benchmark to make the current building better and look new, same configuration. But it might be there's a piece that is, if for whatever reasons, certain buildings can't have as much, you want to see what must happen in there. And so we'll be able to do that for you. And like I said, it's a matter of just estimating what's the black boxes.
And also, I mean, we've gotten some of this also from Jimmy and Daryl, but at the public meeting, I think it's going to be really helpful to have them there because, Scott's pointed out many times, like, don't necessarily believe what you see on social media. I have seen a number of people comment, well, if you would have just kept your buildings up in the first place. And I just really want our public to understand how much work our maintenance and facility folks have been doing. And the thing is, our buildings are in such, and a lot of people see what they see when they walk in and say the building's in great shape.
Don't they?
And that's for a lot of reasons, but the reason they're running and your kids are warm in the winter and cooler in the hot weather is because of the job that they all do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think, they probably know already what needs to go and what, in terms of pieces like plumbing and this building needs to, we need to get rid of that, we need to fix that, or whatever it is. They probably already know that because they've been working on it for forever. So I do look forward to that May meeting, should people ask, so they can hear just how much work our folks are doing to keep our buildings in the tip-top shape they are in.
In some instances, you're maintaining them so well, you're outlasting the availability of parts. Like, manufacturers is like, well, who would have one of those still? That's 40 years old. Why would we make new parts for that? You know?
Right,
And so
right.
it just, it's indicative of how well you're trying to stretch the life of things.
Yeah.
And in some cases, your preventative maintenance list is life cycle. Certain things, no matter how well you maintain them, just
Gonna wear out.
yeah, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but just because a 1960 car can still drive on the road, would you want to be driving it on a trip without airbags and without safety measures? So you have, I don't know how that translates to talking to your community about, yeah, we have great teachers, and probably many of them could go out in a tent and do a great job with the students, but will we want to put them in a tent?
Right.
We're Connersville, we're Fayette County, we're better than that. And so at some level, you as a board have that conversation in living rooms and at churches and however those conversations take place, because you're exactly right, there are people who will believe, because they drove by and they see you have graduation this year, and they think, just keep doing what you're doing, we're happy. And so there's some messaging, and so we'll do our best with the presentation, and then we want you to pick that up and have it be a useful tool for future conversation
Right.
throughout the summer.
I think when we plugged in all of the computer equipment at the middle school back in the late 90s, there was a transformer outside my classroom window that blew. And when they tried to get the parts for it, it was from 1953 and had not been altered since then, and this would have been about 1996, 97. And when they went to get the parts for it, it was like, what? This has been obsolete for a long time. And what I applaud Gibraltar for doing is giving us an idea of those things which are way beyond the life that they should have had, which bespeaks how well they have been maintained. But after a while, when you can't get parts for an antique car, you can't get parts for an antique car. You have to go a different direction.
Are we hearing that you want us to keep the 3 and the 2 school in front of us in our sites?
I think we need to.
I think we need to for the sake of information.
Okay,
So
okay.
when we go to make a final decision, we've taken every option under consideration, and we're not flying by the seat of our pants making a decision on what we're going to do.
And I would say not just to help us make the decision, but to give us that information for the public,
Yeah.
so that we can say, this is the reason that we didn't do that.
And you may have some in the community who will do the math and say, I like the option of spending more at 2 schools.
So I'm gonna ask,
You'll have to hear it.
Yeah, you're gonna have
You'll have to hear it and then decide.
I'm gonna ask another question on that. And it would be for you, for both, all of you, that, have you ever had a community go to 1 elementary?
After having like a
In
number
this
like
situation like
ours.
this, instead of going to 2 new, going to 1 new, centrally located or something that you, have you done the costing, have you built a building that big that would handle that many students?
I would say with the size of the schools that you have, that's probably one of the larger, you'd be setting a record, one of the larger elementary schools in Indiana.
We love
Yeah, I think that there are 2 miles that I'm thinking, I don't know that they're 1,500 though.
Yeah.
There's we built a new elementary in Frankfurt where we call it dual elementary school. Where they built really two elementaries and they butted them up. So the kitchen was shared and mechanical was shared. We did, I think that was based on a model in Avon, or Brownsburg.
Yeah, so they found land that, so we're talking about acres of land, they found enough land they could buy, Bill's new, put the gym and and we've done that too, where you put the core pieces that,
Are the most
one kitchen, because the kitchens are
shared
expensive,
pieces, yes.
and then you have two wings. We've had a couple of experiences, I've had a couple of experiences where, in their smaller communities than yours, where they've reached a point where they'll close all three of their schools and build one new. But the new might only be 700 kids.
I was just asking if we'd had one that large,
Not that large.
that level.
I can speak to a couple down south that are being designed. Those are for 1,000 students, but they're going to exceed 130,000 square feet.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna grow in the size to hold that, I understand that, I was just curious.
What's our total elementary enrollment now, Scott?
About 1,500,
And about how many hundred are we losing each year?
50 on average.
Okay.
So we are shrinking. And that's
Is
well
that
known.
just elementary then, or?
No, our high school's down in the mid-900s. Middle school is right at 500, so it's just going to continue to.
So, I know you gave us some rough numbers here on specifically the elementary. That's per school, okay, so. I think that would give me, I could use that roughly to estimate.
And going to one great big school creates some educational issues because depending on, bigger is not necessarily going to provide the best learning environment for the kids. And it just doesn't. And we found that out when consolidated schools back in the 60s, that bigger wasn't necessarily better. So we have to be very careful. Just was sheer numbers, I think.
I got two things that we'll talk about later because must and mays, and when you were speaking, made me think about the 5 elementaries, what are the things we must do? And when that's all done, what are some things we may do? And it's almost like the shopping list of, what we saw at the high school. And so we'll get to that. It's also a term that we use in elementary schools. The kids, you must do this, and then you may choose to do this if you get this done first. And then the other thing is celebrating maintenance, building and grounds, for what they do. So I shifted to the community meeting, which we will next, is that what do we hope to accomplish? That's one of the things that I think we hope to accomplish is lift them up, celebrate them, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but you couldn't find a prouder group. They met us on our tours that day. They didn't have to, they weren't asked to, but they wanted to show us their facilities, they wanted to show us those areas. They made Victor crawl in the tunnels underneath the buildings. He's wearing a suit crawling under tunnels, but I wouldn't go, I was kind of scared, to be honest, so I let them do it. But as we shift things that we want to do today, discuss and review the importance of the generational life cycle school projects. Big opportunity ahead of us. Clear understanding of the content, and this is where I want to talk about the community input, or the community meeting opportunity. What do you hope to accomplish that night? And then what we'll start to do is build that so that it's in presentation form.
Chris, I went back just a second. Do you see $6 million at each one of those schools getting us where we need to be?
From your professional opinion?
Yes. Are we up in good shape?
Why don't you give us a month to come back with some real numbers, because it's all, I'm listening, the musts are, it sounds like an easy calculation, but it's not. And I'll give you an example. Are you going to do all the lighting and not do the ceilings? Or are you going to do all the ceilings, paint, but not do the floor? So there's some things that get, decisions that there's sort of this economy, it's a tipping point where if you do this, this, and this, you really should do this.
Like if you're gonna change ductwork and do stuff up there, you would probably
need
wanna
to
do
do
the
the ceilings.
ceilings. You might have to lower or raise a ceiling like we saw at Loper.
Right, so while I'm dodging your question, I think we ought to come in with those kind of decisions we made in terms of creating a baseline for you. And you can challenge those decisions, and we can come back and forth.
My biggest concern is we're gonna have to put 8 into one and 2 in the other and skip by. You know, or
Right,
something.
right.
I mean, that's an issue, I think. Right, but I think they could come to that.
But what you will see on May 24th when we come together is not only like estimates, but also visuals of what that would look like, so you can kind of wrap your mind around what would that entail? What does a refresh look like? What will the classrooms look
Right,
like? All
right.
those different things.
I,
I was gonna say, I was gonna add to your comment about the May 15th meeting, what we're looking to get out inside of it. And I don't think I can stress this enough, and I may not be able to be there. But the point is, the public needs to come out and voice their opinion, not only the negatives, but also the positives. You know, we get a lot of people, it's just like social media and everything else. It's easy for hear people say, I don't like this, I don't like that, they're wrong. It's always the negative. But then there's many people out there that are like, I'm all for this. These are the kids, it's the future. We want to do this. We need to hear that as well. And not just, you know, we may have 200 people show up, and every one of them, I don't want you to close any schools. I want to leave it the way it was from 1950. But then you may have 5,000 in the community who are like, you know what, let's all have some new stuff and upgrade ourselves.
Usually they don't speak up.
But that's the problem, but I'm
okay,
trying
so
to
my
encourage that.
idea about how that would look, while we did post the facilities information on our school website, you know, that's a lot to look at. So I was looking at Gibraltar doing a summary of needs. And, you know, emphasizing, which I think the public needs to know, you know, longevity of various things in each building. I mean, I don't think we need to go specifics to each building. Well, Everton has this, and Eastview has this, and they need this changed. But rather looking at what systems that control the building, heating, cooling, water, electrical, and then the facial, you know, what people see when they come in. I do think public needs to know, I mean, we've said it in these meetings that we have this bond coming off and we're looking at approximately 30 million, maybe that'll shift a little bit. And I think the public needs to know the price of some of these things, because otherwise, if we don't give any information at this public meeting, we're not allowing them to think for themselves and ask some really good questions that I would like to, questions or comments that I would like to hear. So, you know, if the public hears at the outset, okay, we're possibly going to have in the area of $30 million. We probably have 10 million in needs in every building, if not more. And we're not talking about just building an athletic field. We're talking about your kids being comfortable in the classroom, having enough lighting, having the heat be appropriate, and the number of man hours that are being used right now to keep our buildings going. You know, I think we're not even fully aware of how much time is spent in each building keeping everything going. So I want to see a lot of information given out, and then I would like the public to have an opportunity after the information is given out to ask some questions of whoever, you know, probably less us board members, because you are the folks that have the knowledge, and be able to field some of those questions. That's kind of how I viewed it. I know we've gone around a little bit. Scott's asked some questions of us, you know, do we want it to just be where they submit a question or a statement? I want responses. You know, in our board meetings, it's just our meeting held in public. It's not an opportunity for Q&A. It's a Q, but no A, because we're doing our business. So we take the questions. Sometimes those questions end up getting answered, or Scott at the end of the meeting will kind of summarize something that I think answers some of the questions of the public. But this meeting, I'd like to see it be different.
Okay, I have been a part of meetings like this. you think, it took us a long time to get to this place to look
know.
at numbers, so I'm a little worried about jumping in if we're looking at 3 schools and 5 schools, and, because I feel like we might get the emotional reaction we're not ready for, because they haven't had all the information.
Right.
I look at, there's definitely some things that information that needs to come forward, and for an understanding, I even think the enrollment part is good for them to understand.
Absolutely. And transportation,
Yes,
current
and what's
transportation issues.
And what's happening at, from a capacity standpoint at each of the schools, so that they understand what they have, an overview of that, an overview of the needs. So we're just setting the stage with information. And then the second part of that is, I'm not sure it would be productive of passing around a microphone and one person speaking and then asking us a good question.
Okay.
What I do see productive is, and maybe it's leaning on the admin team a little bit, and us as well, but you coordinate where you have tables, and so people go sit at tables. They're after they hear the information, they go sit at a table with a friendly face, and it's not someone that's, it's someone that's connected to it, understanding. And then what they do is they just listen to the people at their table. They take in all the information. After hearing this tonight, what does this make you think? What are you hoping, what other questions do you might have? And so you are creating this a little bit more intimate way to get some input versus the whole group. And then
But how do we answer those questions if we're just taking notes?
So you take notes, you gather those, and then you have the people at the table share out. And so that leader at that table would then walk up to the microphone and said, I had these questions at my table. And what's good is that person that's facilitating the conversation at the table, they can go through that, probably answer some that, might be an outlier question. So they can cross that off, okay, I have these 5 questions. And then they go up, they ask the question on the microphone. It's not the person asking it, so there's not that same emotion, but they are able to then ask the question to the group. We answer it, and then the challenge to the other people that are at those share-out tables, those principals or might be board members that are at that table, is you're crossing off everything on your list that's already been asked. And so, they already asked about capacity. Well, they covered that in the first. And so then it's table 2 turn. You go up and you share the rest of the questions that are on your list. And so you filter through, everyone's had a chance to ask the questions. You're efficient with the time because you're not repeating. You also are having, someone that summarizes the questions and brings them up, so.
Leslie, that's kind of how they had the meeting for River's Edge when they started.
Oh.
There was things put on the wall.
Right, I hate that stuff. We're not doing big papers on the wall with stickers. I'm sorry, but, the only reason I say that, I think that's effective for a brainstorming session. And usually in those, then they come back and they revisit those and they narrow those papers down. I think that would be a little unwieldy for this, but this format, it may change if we decide to do it that way, where we locate it.
I was getting ready to say, that's not the best facility for table situation.
This is the Y Center, isn't it?
No, it's
The middle school auditorium, no tables, and,
Yeah, I like that idea.
And the community meeting number 2 is a little bit more about, these are the options that we've explored. You share the options, you show visual the options, and then you do the same kind of community roundtable.
Okay.
If you're married to the auditorium, because it's just a better presentation space than anything you have, you could when everybody comes in, you could give them note cards, and they could be writing down questions and collect them at the aisles during the presentation, and then they could be brought up, and somebody's sorting and organizing, because there might be 5 note cards that all have the same question, and then you answer the questions you can, and others you say, this one we'll get back, we'll do it at the next meeting.
I think that's kind of what we talked about in the email, isn't it?
Yeah, it was how to
cards to the
field the
aisle.
questions, yeah. That could work. I did like your idea of it being smaller and kind of conversational. That's just that builds more relationships.
Yes, and I think not this one coming up, but the next one you have, when the money's involved,
Yeah.
you'll want to, not only, I think, organize them at tables, you want to be intentional about who leads each table
Okay.
friendly faces, as Chris said, get people who, and then you'll definitely want them to be in groups, smaller groups.
Okay.
So that, and we can talk later, or as you know, you would probably want to try and invite people to come as well. People that, as Jeremy said, there are people who are positive.
Right.
Get them to come and sit and listen to what the negative people are saying, so that they can think, oh my gosh, if I don't get involved, this isn't even going anywhere.
And I just want to be, I
And
mean.
that's how those roundtables
I'd
work.
like to reframe the word negative. I think all of our patrons, I mean, honestly, I think that they genuinely love our schools, and they want the best for their kids too. And there's a lot of fear when you think about, what's going to change and how's it going to change. So I want to honor that and not look at it as though their only focus is to be negative. I think out of fear, we want to make sure that our feelings are heard, and they're not always framed as starting off by saying, hey, everybody's doing a great job, I'm concerned you're going to close my school. Emotions run high, and that first part gets missed, and the I'm concerned you're going to close my school, and it doesn't necessarily come out that way. So you want to have all the voices in the room, but so I don't want it to be like that we have a positive and a negative group. We have a lot of people who are really interested in knowing what's going on. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to share what's going on. And allow opportunities for questions. And I thank you for that comment about having a second meeting that could be a little different in its setup.
Yeah, it'll be essential. I would urge you not to, once you get your arms locked around it as a board, which is what you want a board to do, have a meeting that says, we're getting real close to doing this, please come listen to what we think and tell us, is there anything else that you think we haven't thought through? Because in 1 month, we're having a project hearing, and at that point, it's been decided you're going to move forward with this, and you'll follow the process of people for or against, or whatever Ice Miller and the legal counsel says. But and that's you'll need that meeting. But you have a lot of work to do before you get ready.
Right, at that first meeting too, we'd have to have the information presented before we hand those cards out, because people will have questions, they wouldn't just fill them right when they get in, because they don't have the information.
Is a board member, has it been decided, let's say, like, is board president moderating, or is superintendent moderating?
No.
That's what I was thinking.
I
would encourage you, one other thing I would encourage you to do, we love your community, Skillman and Gibraltar, but we're out of towners, we're invited guests.
Oh, right.
So you'll want a moderator, you want somebody at the microphone that, the reason I asked about board president and superintendent, those are like the two people that.
Right, I kind of figured Scott would be doing it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be sharing the information, we would go through that part, it's just.
It's a welcome, and this is what we're trying to do, and this is how cards are done, questions are handled, and just kind of.
And just
glad you're here.
Since you've done these before, what's the arrangement of where everybody sits? The middle school's a little smaller than the high school auditorium. There's a stage, obviously. I assume that's where all of you will be. Where would the board sit? How does that get configured? I think that's helpful to know.
I have liked, well, it's, you are how you appear to be, right? And so many boards like to sit in the front rows or front row to say to the community, we're hearing this like you are.
We're part of the audience too.
Yes. A couple of administrators need to sit on the stage with us to help us manage a group, or to kick us under the table and warn us that, whatever.
Yeah.
But I've seen boards do that. That's the majority. There are some boards that, it sounds like this, introductory person, superintendent says, our board is here, and gestures to them on the stage because they want to look at you and see your reaction to this information, and they want to be visible for you. But But the look is more like, we're a board, that's what you elected us for, and eventually, we're gonna make decisions. For this meeting now, maybe if you're in the group, it's a good step to say, hey, we're just here, just like you all are. We've got professionals here, be mostly Gibraltar.
And I would look at it, frame it as, we've heard all this, we wanted you to hear this as well. This
Sure, well,
information.
that is the purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know, because if it is an auditorium, so there's probably a stage and stuff.
There's a
There's a
stage, and then
stage.
there's 3 steps, and then there's an area right in front before you get to the seating. There's a balcony that I'm not sure whether we can use or not.
So you might want to be in the front row, so you're one of the community.
I just had another kind of weird thought. We've done something very major in that building that is the delight of this community. We are having the handrails installed in the Spartan Bowl. They're doing it as we speak. So, along with this information, while you're in the building, come down and look at the bowl, see the handrails, and this is a real positive thing for the community. It was privately financed in a matter of days, once the ADA things changed. Give the public an opportunity to see something that they've wanted to see before graduation, before, come and get a sneak preview of what we've got here. I think that would set a really good tone for this meeting. This is something really positive. We're so proud of this. We waited for this for a long time. And now come into the auditorium and we'll discuss, we've got some things to discuss to you about the future. But it's going 30 feet down the hall and opening some doors. But I think that really might set a better tone, because they're going to be thrilled to see what's going on in the bowl with those handrails. And they would not ordinarily see them until, because that gym is not used for public things until graduation in June. So, and some people might come that wouldn't be interested, might even come out of curiosity to see what the bowl looks like. Because that's huge. When it was in the paper that they were putting that in, it was fantastic. Very, very, very popular if we're doing something, and some of this stuff may not be as popular. Just a thought.
Leslie, you mentioned something about the financing part of this, for them to understand what you understand, and, from a capacity, because I think mine shifts to immediately, how are they gonna pay for this? That would probably be on everyone's card. We have a lot of needs, it looks like, in this presentation. How are you gonna pay for this? So that being addressed, and, with whether it's a representative from Baker Tilly, or they give us permission for just a summary slide for people to kind of understand, the presentation that we had in the fall.
Right.
So that would be something that would probably need to be addressed early in the presentation, or at some point before we start.
Right, and I also think, you guys do a great job at all the meetings we've had in presenting things to us, and making sure the public understands that just because we're talking about a whole range from doing nothing to new builds, that is just because we need all the information so that we can make the best decision. That does not mean that we're necessarily considering that, or we're doing absolutely nothing. Because I think that, that creates fear and worry. Oh, they're talking about a new building. Are they gonna build a new building? It's more for, I think, yes, that's something that we all just need to look at, but it's also comparing, well, cost-wise, it would be huge. And it would be, you guys do such a good job with your analogies, about, like the 60s car, the car built in 1960, yeah, it's cool, it's great to look at, but it's got no airbags, and maybe it didn't have seat belts, and would you want to take that on a cross-country trip? I think the way you guys present things is always great, so I know you'll make it so that the public understands, but that's the kind of thing that helps me to understand where you're coming from, and even talking about a new building. Yeah, it'd be great to have transportation reduced and all the costs of facility management, but it comes at a lot of costs too. But I still think, you know, I would hope everybody, whenever they're considering doing something, let's say they're gonna remodel their house, they think, oh man, wouldn't it be great to have like a hot tub in every bedroom? Oh my God, all our kids would love that. I'm gonna do that? Absolutely not, can't even get one. But it's fun to think about.
Right.
We were not planning to have costs at the May 15th meeting.
Okay,
Too much information.
Okay.
Not a manageable dose for your community.
because you don't even, we haven't even heard all
Yeah,
that.
you need to see costs first, and then I think when you see the costs, what we need to do is eliminate things that are getting way beyond.
But how do you address those things, like Chris said, that somebody's saying, well, why can't you just fix this? And, or how much is that gonna cost? Because
We
people will
we
ask
can-
that.
We'll couch it up front
Okay,
to state that, you know, this is the first, not the last meeting.
okay.
And there's a lot of work that the school board's been doing and will continue to do. And tonight, we want to make sure that they hear the facts that schools are well-maintained, but they are beyond their useful life in many areas. We want you to see where those areas are and know that those are the first priorities to be addressed, but there's more than that that needs to be done. And at some point, you will not be able to afford all of this, so the
Right,
board
I
has
think
to.
that's, yeah,
The board
that's
has
great.
to do a lot of thinking,
Can
and
someone record that? That was really good.
That's really good.
I'll do it again on 15.
I don't know about the other board
Scott and
members,
I'll
but
do
I
it again on the
haven't,
15th,
I mean,
right?
just from working with the guys, as long as we've worked with you, I have incredible trust in your ability and how you're gonna do this.
Yeah, and I would caution, because with limited information I know about bond issues and things, that number's a moving target until you're walking right up to the project hearing. So I would resist the urge to say we have 30 million. or
However,
32
we've spoken
million.
about it at public meetings, it's not a secret.
It is, but that number could be 35 or 25. And
Okay.
then the next thing you'd
Yeah.
be answering is what exactly happened? Were you
Right.
telling us the truth the first time, or what?
Yeah.
And so it just, you know, numbers, I love what Victor said, because it's so true. You say a number, and they grab onto that, they write it down, and they never forget that.
Yeah. I hear that.
So again, like if the number ends up being, because interest rates, Randy, right, that number ends up being 28, it's only 2 million, but people will say it's, what'd you do? You said 30.
Sure.
You just spend it somewhere else.
So I'm thinking of a simple slide that shows that line graph of how you've been, you know, financially responsible in your district, and you have some debt falling off, which creates some, you know, funding.
What you
capacity.
might want to do is, I've seen this before, you might want to have a slide that shows how your tax rate, a little line year by year, and also then show what your neighbors have been doing. Obviously, right next door, they spent money on their schools, and they spent money on Newcastle, spent money on their schools. You might want to show how you rank compared to your surrounding counties of school districts in terms of the tax rate. Like, I hear often, hey, we have the lowest tax rate in a 4-county area, and I think our schools show it that way. Or the opposite, you know, so you might want to show comparison, because much like you're looking at your current school's conditions, here's how we size up financially with our neighbors, with rates and things.
So Randy, again, when is that hearing that we know how much there's gonna be available in the funding?
There isn't a hearing
There's
scheduled
not,
right now.
when will you get the number? I guess, when will you get the number that's
I
gonna be
will-
available?
I will be meeting with the finance people,
Uh-huh.
but just as Jim said, what you get into multiple factors. Number one is an interest rate. I mean, everybody, I think, understands interest rate. Are we at 4%, 5%, 3%? Where are we? Everybody gets that. But even further out there, is this, I mean, the longest we can go on a bond issue today is 20 years. So are we going to basically lock in future boards that are going to go for the maximum we can get for 20 years? That's what we've been faced with the middle school remodel. That we've been, except that got extended and refinanced and it even ended up. Or are we going to say, we're only going to go for 25 million, but it'll pay off in 16 years? So there's there's the length of it, there's the interest rate, all of those factors go into it. I know that Baker Tilly, as I've talked to them, communicated with them, is a question, are there other funds, such as our operations fund, can we shift money out of that, out of operations, to put into a bond to make it be a little longer, or not longer, but to make it a little larger. So those will all be factors that come into it.
We'll also have to include cost-saving measures that would play a role into that financial number.
What do you mean?
If you're reducing the number of schools, you got a cost savings there.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
There's multiple variables that tie that can be used into that number of how much money we have to use.
Just your utility costs when you do all the LEDs and the efficient systems, that adds up over those 20 years or whatever to quite a bit.
I was gonna comment too, I see you got there, is this program is also about operational costs, isn't it, Randy? I mean, it's building utilities and it's utilization of square footage, maintenance, custodial, all those, so I heard someone ask about how school finance works, and it's a little nugget of, here's debt service and we can't pay salaries out of debt service and we don't pay for custodian out of debt service, might be, a little bit of that nugget in the presentation might be useful.
I just think somebody's gonna ask, how much is all this gonna cost?
Well, yeah, of course they are. We don't have that. We don't
We-
even
we
have
don't- but
It's a ballpark figure. That, I mean,
Well, we won't say a ballpark on the 15th.
I'm sorry?
I'm not intending to say a ballpark figure on the 15th of May.
No, but eventually,
Yeah,
Yeah.
eventually you'll have a range.
yeah, because we're not gonna know if it's 30 million, 32 million, 28 million. It's a ballpark figure, that's all I was saying. And like Leslie said, we've already said that in public meeting, like tonight, that number is out there roughly. You know, people have that in their head. Like you said, that people grab a number, and that number's already been exposed.
So I guess where I'm coming from, if we don't have a number, I mean, I know we don't, how are we gonna allocate, how are we gonna decide how much to put in each area? You know, just say, since we've said 30, say we've got 30, and to do everything we decided we wanted to do at this time is 35 million. Well, is there extra money somewhere for the overage, or say, you know, that 30, we're planning on 30 and say we got 25, well, then we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board again and reduce, cut down. See what I'm saying? It's, if we don't have, you know, kind of specifics there, how are we gonna decide what we can do?
Well, that's
That's
the
where
next
I'm-
piece of the so
That's where I'm,
we scaffold the information for you. So the next work session, you'll have elementary school numbers. And then,
For all options, right?
yeah, for all options.
Good.
Then you start to have this
Great.
range. Then you're gonna hear, this is what this bond issue does. I would encourage you, all the boards we work with, they all say, well, what would a 5-cent increase be? What would a 10-cent tax increase be? And then they also like to have in their hip pocket, why didn't you just do all the work? Well, because it was like a $4 tax rate increase, and that's insane. So, you know, because somebody will ask that question, like, why are we just doing it all? So, and so you scaffold that piece of information. My sense is, the way you talked and worked, as you're putting the bond amount that you can afford in there, you're already crossing things off the list. Like, you're kind of doing it at the same time. Just like you did tonight, when you hear the elementary numbers, you're gonna start crossing some things off the list right away. And that's how it'll happen to you. It'll just sort of be organic in these meetings as each layer of information is scaffolded and built. At the top, then you'll arrive at bond issue aligned with, this is what we're gonna get for our money.
So when do we have that meeting where we all discuss what we think our priorities are?
I think we had said, another work session.
In June.
April
Oh,
or
May-
May
May-
24th.
May 24th.
And then we were thinking in June, either we're coming back or you're having another work session in June.
With all the information.
And then if you intend to meet a timeline that says, we have reasons why we want to make a decision for a project hearing this year, then you're probably in July starting to feed us information so we can get that aligned. Like, can Skillman Gibraltar tell us, are we confident we're going to get these things for this bond issue? And then August, you're probably test flying that in your community without actually having a project hearing. You probably have like a round table. Generally, I hear people are in a good mood when school starts. And so you have like an August round table that says, hey, in the next couple of months, the board's gonna do this bond issue. Here's the what, here's the why. What do you think?
And you guys all seem to be very positive people, or positive as well. And I think, and this is not abnormal, so like what you're going through, school boards are having these same conversations all over. Because there's never enough money to do everything that you want to do. And so there are some hard decisions, but we'll get to a place that we'll be excited about the things that you can do, because it is a big opportunity that you haven't been able to do in 20 years. So there's a lot that you can do. We're just going through this to make sure we're doing the right things and that your community will support.
Also, I think it's very important for the public to understand, you know, we were suddenly closing 2 elementary schools, or at least one, and it was all out on social media, and we had board meetings with all kinds of people. Why were you going to vote tonight on closing our school? Which was about as far from the truth as it could be. I think it's important that the public have some idea of how long this takes, that it is a very slow and it's a very deliberate process. Nobody is doing anything behind their backs. We're not going to have a secret vote and decide to close the school. This is a huge, long-term project that we're taking the time that we need so we make sure that we do it appropriately and not, we're not hiding anything from them. But it's not, there's no quick answers here. We're not going to have a good idea of what we're going to go forward with until we get a lot more information. And I think that's really, really important for the community to understand. That, you know, we're not going to vote for a very long time on what we're going to do. We've got our homework to do, and we've got a lot of it to do before we even would make some of these considerations serious.
I feel like we have enough information about pulling together a presentation for May 15th. I think we settled on, if everybody's comfortable with the format of it, in this first round, it's more information and then the opportunity to share questions on cards. Would this be something in the interest of time, we would be able to answer questions if there's someone that's filtering them to make sure we don't have repetitive ones? But anything that does, you know, people may not want a 3-hour meeting depending on who's there, but we would be able to capture all the questions, and it's something that we post online from the first community
I
meeting.
think you could do a FAQ type of thing.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you post everything and provide the answers, because some of it we may not be able to provide right then.
Right, right.
So that could be
That's
really
fine.
laborious to try to go
And we
through.
can let people
That's
know
50
that,
questions.
you know, we'll do the best to respond to what we can, and then we'll have an FAQ on the website.
What I'm concerned with, some people really want to go and speak. And I know after they hear, a lot of the things they don't know now. You know, after your presentation, probably questions are going to be answered. But there's going to be people there, in my opinion, that are really going to want to speak for themselves and not just write it down on a card.
Okay.
I really do, you know. But I do, they need to hear the presentation first. And that's going to alleviate, you know,
Well, and
questions, I'm
part,
sure.
yeah, I mean, if you did ask questions and you, I mean, I think we're gonna have to let the public know, we may not have time to answer everything, we can't keep people forever. So,
Right.
I suppose we could answer what we could and then have people have cards available for them to write down questions, and then we put those in the FAQs. That may be something we can decide with Scott.
Right.
And don't have to take their time to
Right.
figure that out.
You could, at the beginning of the meeting, the moderator could say, the system, and we have cards, and make sure if you need cards, raise your hand. And then you could either just ask by show of hands, is there anyone in the audience who has come tonight to want to speak? and then the moderator can see what that looks like. And then if it's a lot of people, make the decision, like, am I gonna pass around a clipboard and do the 3-minute drill, which is what you would do in a normal setting. If it's just a couple of people, then you just say, I see just a couple, 3 hands, so I think what we'll say is there's a microphone over here. So we have note cards, we'll answer questions that way, but for 2 or 3 of you that raise your hand, you want to speak, please know we're not going to keep you from doing that, and just come over to the microphone, and while we're answering questions, at some point we'll ask you to speak, and I'm sure you'll be considerate of the time spent with everybody here. And if they want to speak for 3 or 5 minutes, let them. So the moderator can make that judgment of, oh, there's a lot of people doing this, so we got to pass around a clipboard.
Right.
Have a system, or if it's just a couple people, do that.
The other thing is, we're giving you so many options that you can choose from. I was thinking about the cards, and then for those of you not comfortable with putting your, to help us build our, FAQ list to post online, and you want to speak to someone in person, we'll have people available afterwards, so that you can have a one-on-one conversation.
Okay. I like that too.
Leslie Jacobs and Scott Adams will be in the back, and you can talk to them.
Jeremy and Lori.
As far as people who wanted to speak, couldn't we do the same thing that we do at our meetings here? And that way, we'd already have that information going into the meeting? These are
Except
the
that they
people
don't
that-
have, they don't.
The problem will be they won't have the information, right?
Right, they won't have the information
So you
yet.
have to ask if they came after they hear their information.
I mean,
The moderator could even do it
They may
after
have
the
a question
presentation.
that gets answered. If they say, I don't know what the question would be, but it might get answered by somebody.
What's going to be really important is how we advertise, and so that people understand what the intent of the meeting is and what they will be getting.
That's why we have Matt here. He's gonna help advertise in the paper and make sure it's,
And we're sharing the condition assessment of the facilities.
and I think the school corporation has already posted on social media that the event is taking place, probably not with a lot of information, so I don't know, maybe we can tweak that to just list, this is who will be there, and, I mean, it might be beneficial, I don't know. I think that's something we can kind of look at on our end.
I think we need to make sure people know it's an educational meeting,
Right,
more than anything else.
right.
I like that term, it is.
Turn things back over to Madam President.
Ah,
To
all
the
right,
board.
everybody done? Well, thank you. I mean, there's not words to express how grateful I'm
Our
sure we
pleasure.
all are for everything that you guys are doing for us, and information and fielding questions that we may think are dumb, and we never act like we're dumb.
And I would say the same back to you. I mean, this is a huge commitment on your part from the board and from Scott and Randy. This is one little piece of what they do on a daily basis, so appreciate their time as well.
Yeah. With that, I need to seek a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.